This is a Fox 12 podcast.
Welcome to Beyond the Broadcast, where we take you behind the scenes on some of the biggest stories that we're covering here at Fox 12 News. I'm Ezra Kaplan, and today I'm joined by Julia Lopez. Julia, we're here to talk about the explosion that happened at the paper mill up in Longview. This happened a week ago, right? Today is June 2nd. It's Tuesday. We've been covering this for a week. You were one of the first reporters on the scene. Give us just a quick overview of what exactly happened here.
Every day over the past week, this story has changed, has evolved in some way. What we know right now is there was a tragic accident at the Nippon paper mill, something that we don't want to think is ever even possible. 11 people, 11 workers killed in this accident. It's something the community of Longview is processing and looking forward, asking a lot of questions. What happened? Why did it happen? And how can we guarantee it won't happen again?
Yeah. Well, for our viewers and for our listeners, let's take a minute, watch some of the coverage that we've been producing over the past just over a week, and then we'll come back and chat about kind of what the coverage has been like.
At this time, there are also individuals who remain unaccounted for as crews recover and continue the recovery and accountability operations.
Police and fire officials say it's not the update anyone wanted, as the search for victims continued throughout the afternoon after a chemical tank imploded at a paper mill.
Injuries. 10 personnel were transported from the site.
Among those hurt, 1 firefighter and 8 employees. The Longview Fire Department confirms 1 employee did die, and there are 9 more unaccounted for. The building houses multiple manufacturing companies, but the incident originated at Nippon Dynawave Packaging, when a vat containing white liquor, quote, ruptured.
The initial information is it was roughly an 80,000 gallon tank that was roughly 60% full.
White liquor is a chemical involved in the crafting of paper and pulp products.
The chemical at the center of the explosion at the Nippon Dynawave paper mill is known as white liquor. It's a highly caustic chemical that is made up of sodium hydroxide and sodium sulfide, and it's used in the paper-making process to break down wood chips into pulp. What makes it so dangerous is that it has a very high pH, meaning that it is a strong base. Now, just like an acid, it can cause severe burns. But while acid usually sits on the surface of the skin, causing significant superficial burns, a strong base, like white liquor, penetrates into the body, literally melting cells and fats and resulting in deep and often devastating burns. At Nippon, the tank that exploded was holding 600,000 gallons of white liquor. That's about the same as an Olympic-sized swimming pool, full of dangerous chemicals.
Several Longview officials, including the Cowlitz County coroner, confirmed they have recovered and identified all of the missing bodies in the implosion, bringing the total number to 11 people who died as a result.
Our office immediately began preparing for what we knew would be one of the most significant tragedies our community has experienced since the eruption of Mount St. Helens.
As the victims' families are now prepared to live without their loved ones, officials hope to never forget the lives lost in this unimaginable tragedy.
These were not just employees or union members. They were fathers, sons, friends who helped build this facility and this community every single day.
All right, so that laid out some of the major details of the story of what happened. Walk me through just, for people who haven't covered a major breaking story like this before, you get the call. I'm sure we didn't know that this was the scale of the disaster it truly was when we first found out about it. Walk me through some of those first, kind of that first day when you got sent out to cover the story.
Yeah, we didn't know the scale at all. We were on our way just knowing there was some sort of chemical spill with injuries. That's all the information we had. And I remember that first press conference learning that there were fatalities. That's all they told us. Realizing this isn't what we thought it was. This is something bigger, something worse, and it's going to be ongoing. Since then, of course, we've learned of the 11 workers who lost their lives. We've learned a bit more about what might have led up to that moment. We still have a lot of questions left, but it speaks to the scale of the situation, right? That this is just evolving every single day and that we're going to be talking about this for a very long time, trying to learn more.
Now, when you go in, you're more or less going in blind. When you get there, what are the first things you're doing? How are you approaching kind of trying to figure out what is going on?
We arrived at the facility and just started asking questions. There were other news crews there. We're walking around, we're talking to people, just trying to, gauge exactly where we should be, the questions that we should even be asking. We're trying to bring viewers information as quickly as possible. And in a situation like this, where it's so controlled, for those who might not have seen our coverage or been to this facility in Longview, it's very closed off. So I've never been able to go up to where the vat is that was destroyed. It's very deep in the facility. So we're outside of it trying to figure out what's going on the inside. That first day as well, we were able to put a drone in the air. That's something we haven't been able to do since because of regulated airspace. But we were able to get a drone in the air, help us get a little bit more of an idea of what the situation might look like inside. We saw, of course, the immense damage to the vat, to the facility, the vehicles around it. Yeah. So that helped us kind of pinpoint, these are the questions that we should be asking. This is what we should be looking more into. And we just go from there, really. We start trying to find community members who are impacted. That first day, it was going through the neighborhood, talking with people who live within a mile of the facility. They were all very worried about air quality, which is, of course, another conversation that we've been continuing to have with environmental agencies since this. So the first day is really about the basics.
Yeah. Pretty quickly, we learned what this chemical was, right? It's something called white liquor. And I think, so I did a little bit of an explainer. It was kind of, in these kinds of big breaking news situations, it's an all hands on deck, right? So everybody's taking a different sliver, a different wedge of the story. I think it's interesting, and for the viewers and for those folks who are listening, this white liquor, this substance that exploded, we should be clear, because there has been some debate around implosion versus explosion. We've heard that the tank imploded and then exploded. I think for me, I was listening to one of the press conferences, and it was one of either the fire chief or battalion chief who said, implosion, explosion, violent reaction. We don't care. What we see is the aftermath that looks like an explosion. So they're calling it explosion. That's what I've been going with. But this chemical is nasty stuff. This white liquor, it's like a really basic combination of sodium hydroxide and sodium sulfide. When you were talking to the neighbors and to the people around, how quickly, beyond just the shock of the loss of life and the the tragedy of the situation, how quickly was it clear that this was an environmental disaster as well?
It was immediate. For those people who live near this facility, what I found talking with them is that air quality is already something that they are thinking about.
They're in an industrial area.
They're in an industrial area, exactly. You can see plumes of smoke and other chemicals that are, of course, cleared to be exiting the facility, but you can see it as you drive up. And so the neighbors that I spoke with already had this top of mind. They said, this is where they live. They don't have a choice, but this is a fear that they live with already. So to have that fear realized, of course, quite quickly, environmental officials came out and said, we don't have a concern of air quality. We did get a brief notice from the Washington Poison Center, if you live nearby, to close your windows, turn off your HVAC systems as a preventative measure. Yeah. Otherwise, quite quickly, they did verify that there were no contaminants detected in the air. But for people who live nearby, to be quite frank, it doesn't matter what they're being told. They don't feel comfortable. Yeah. So quite quickly, it was a question of environment. And of course, within the first 24 hours, people were also finding dead fish, dead carp in the dikes and ditch systems, which is, of course, alarming. Alerting people to the fact that this is something environmental. And even though they were, again, quite quick to say, okay, just don't drink the water, stay away from the ditches, you'll be okay. You can tell people that, but it's, of course, concerning to walk out of your house and see dead fish in the ditch feet away from you.
How did the community respond to, what turned out to be this influx of media coming in to tell this story that happened in their backyard?
That's a good question. I'm as far as residents go, I think that a lot of the people that I spoke with were grateful for, having someone there to ask those questions and feel like they had a voice in all of this. And that's what I'm always grateful as a journalist to be able to do. This isn't exactly what you asked, but I've been thinking so much about the first responders, about the fire officials who have been providing updates every single day, who have never had to deal with anything like this before. They're already navigating such a mass tragedy in their day-to-day. And then coming to give us such clear updates and keeping us up to date so that we can keep the community up to date and informed. I can't even imagine what that's been like for them to have to make that turnaround.
And especially, it's one thing if this happens in a large city like say Portland or Seattle, where you've got a fire department, a fire chief that are professionals, and maybe they have a connection to the scene, maybe they don't. Longview is not a big community. It's not a big town. And I got to imagine that a lot of these first responders are doing their job, first responding, and also have personal ties, whether it's family, whether it's a friend, whether it's somebody at their church, whatever. I got to imagine most people know somebody who's pretty seriously impacted by this disaster.
That's exactly it. We were told pretty early on there are responders at the scene, working to recover victims who have loved ones who were lost or who were hurt, and they're coming to work and they're doing what they can to recover the scene, to recover any more victims. Not only that, but these responders are holding press conferences for us around the clock. Again, something impressive to do under such a high-stress situation. And then they would tell us straight out, right when we're done here, we're going right back in. They are not taking breaks. They were taking breaks overnight for safety reasons because it was unsafe to navigate the facility in the dark. But they were only taking breaks to talk with us, and they're going right back out to work.
So you mentioned that, we aren't able to fly drones anymore, and that's because there was a temporary flight restriction put in place, pretty common for agencies and for officials to do. But, early on, we did have time to put a drone up to get some video and some stills. And for those who are watching, we'll show that right now. Walk me through what we saw once we could kind of get that perspective from the sky.
Ezra, it was shocking, honestly. Yeah. We could not believe what we were looking at when the drone was in the air and we're seeing the screen, and it just looks so devastating. Anyone who's seen the video probably can't get it out of their heads. We have the large 900,000-gallon tank that is destroyed. You brought up earlier implosion versus explosion. You really can't tell. It's collapsed. It's on its side.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a disaster. And then you just see the ripple effect that's had. There's cars flipped completely upside down.
That's one of the things that I think for me, that's what really nailed it and like sent home just the violence, just the energy of this event was, you look at that picture, you look at the tank, of course, your eyes immediately go to this tank that's like split in half and like ruptured and totally disfigured. But it's the cars, it's the pickup trucks that are like twisted, that are flipped upside down, that like have clearly been thrown tens, if not like 100 feet across this yard. I mean, you look at something like that and it's like, how could anybody survive something like that? It was just devastating. To me, I think that's also when this event started getting a lot more attention. But I'm curious from your experience, when you're on the ground, we talked a little bit about some of the environmental impacts before. One of the key ingredients in white liquor is hydrogen sulfide, and hydrogen sulfide has a pretty gnarly smell. It's sulfur-based. It smells like rotten eggs. I'm curious, did you smell that? Was that really clear to you when you got to the scene?
Immediately clear. It was not a pleasant smell for the entirety of our time there. And of course, there's also operations going on at this facility. For those who might not know, it's not just Nippon Dynawave that operates out of this facility. There's other manufacturers that use that space that were continuing operations to some degree. So there's also a lot coming from that as well. But immediately you can smell that sulfuric distinct odor.
It's very distinct.
It is. I actually had someone reach out to me and was like, when are we going to talk about the water smells all the time? And, there's definitely ongoing effects there, but I think people are very cautious when it's in effect that you can smell immediately when you leave your door. If you look into a ditch, it might look off. You see water being released from fire hydrants. Things aren't normal. So, of course, there's always a bit of, are we safe?
Yeah. While you were out there doing a lot of this reporting on the ground, smelling the smells yourself, talking to the folks, our team was back here doing a lot of the the research, the computer-based work, making some calls. I think it's interesting, and for folks who are not as familiar with the story, I didn't realize just to the extent that we still had so much paper manufacturing happening all up and down the Columbia. What have you learned so far about what they actually did before this disaster hit?
This facility in Nippon in particular has been a staple in the Longview community for years. That's clear. I've talked with so many people who work either at Nippon or in some capacity or at a nearby manufacturer who are absolutely struck by this. I think what people who aren't from the Longview community might not realize, and what I've learned over the past week, is that this is a mill community.
Yeah.
This is a manufacturing community. That's part of course, why this hit so hard for everyone who lives there. You mentioned earlier the probability, everyone knows someone. The importance these manufacturers have and this mill has on the community, I think, especially in this time where inflation is at an all-time high. We've seen cuts across the board. I've heard that workers at this factory were already worried about layoffs for years. And now I've talked with people who say, I make $30 an hour, and now I don't know if my life is safe. Wow. This happened once. Can it happen again? And it's caused a ripple effect for people who want to just work and feed their families. But now there's a question of their own safety.
Yeah.
They want to come home at the end of the day. I think a lot of people are stuck in that dilemma.
So looking forward, what are the next steps? Now that we're at a point where all the bodies have been recovered, families have been notified, they've released the names of all the victims. Where does this story head next?
Next, the big question, of course, is how did this happen? How do we keep it from happening again? Now that the recovery process, as far as the victims go, is coming to a close, we're going to be turning our eye to the investigation. We have federal investigators. We have the Washington Bureau of Labor and Industries on scene, each doing different investigations into what exactly went wrong in this vat. We've just heard the word rupture so far, but we haven't been given any indication of what led to that rupture.
Yeah.
Was there an ongoing safety issue with this vat? We know that Nippon has been under investigation.
Right. They've had several complaints, several investigations before. They just had a chip fire, a couple of years ago on that same facility. So, there are a lot of questions there.
Exactly. And investigations related to structural integrity. So, of course, naturally, you have to wonder, was this something that could have been prevented?
Right.
There's also a question of what was going on at the time of the event. Were people working on that vat? What exactly was happening in the facility that could have led to this? Was it not full enough? Was it too, there's a lot to uncover here. And certainly those investigations into Nippon that we're already undergoing, and I don't remember the exact number, but there's multiple ones that we haven't been told details about because, of course, they are open investigations, but those are happening alongside this overarching investigation into this disaster. Yes, exactly. Now federal investigators are intervening and hopefully going to get some answers. Nippon has said that it will cooperate fully, of course, so hopefully it'll be a clear path forward as far as investigators go, and we'll definitely be closely following any word that comes from this investigation because that is absolutely the biggest question on everyone's mind now. And as I mentioned, there's people afraid to return to work who need to return to work. They want to know that it's safe, and we're asking the same questions.
Well, Julia, great job out there with those, as well as with the whole team. This has been one of those big stories that really just takes everybody jumping on board, and you've been doing great out in the field. So thank you for the work you've been doing out there, and thanks for joining us for this conversation. That'll do it for this conversation of Beyond the Broadcast. We're going to be covering this story for the foreseeable future. There's going to be a lot more to learn about Longview. Check back in here for more on that story and really all the stories that we're working on here at Fox 12 News. We'll bring you behind the scenes of all the work that our journalists are doing. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
This has been a Fox 12 podcast. For more content like this, download the Fox 12 app to your phone or any connected device, like your Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, or Smart TV.